The peripheral nervous system is the part of the nervous system located outside the brain and the spinal cord. It regulates the functions of our body. The peripheral nervous system has two functional units: afferent, or sensory, and efferent, or motor. Here, based on the principle of functional autonomy, we can distinguish two more divisions of the PNS. The somatic nervous system, that controls voluntary actions and conveys sensory information from the skin, skeletal muscles, and joints. And the autonomic nervous system, that controls the involuntary activities within the body, as the functioning of our stomach, for instance. Watch more videos in the EasyAnatomy app. With EasyAnatomy, you can learn much easier and faster. We provide a comprehensive video library, related PDF notes, and atlas sections with engaging flashcards. Download EasyAnatomy from the link in the description. The anatomical components of the PNS are ganglia, which are the groups of cell bodies, and nerves, which are the bundles of axons running together. The latter include 31 pairs of spinal nerves that arise from the spinal cord and 12 pairs of cranial nerves that arise from the brain. In this video, we will briefly discuss the cranial nerves. To get familiar with these nerves, let's list all of them in one place. The first cranial nerve, CN1, the olfactory nerve, is responsible for olfaction, or the sense of smell. The second cranial nerve, CN2, the optic nerve, is responsible for vision. There are three cranial nerves in charge of eye movement. The third cranial nerve, CN3, which is the oculomotor nerve. The fourth cranial nerve, CN4, which is the trochlear nerve. The sixth cranial nerve, CN6, the abducens nerve. The fifth cranial nerve, CN5, the trigeminal nerve, which is responsible for mastication and sensation of the facial area. The seventh cranial nerve, CN7, the facial nerve, in charge of facial expressions, sensory innervation to the taste buds of the anterior two-thirds of the tongue, salivation, and lacrimation. The eighth cranial nerve, CN8, which is the vestibulocochlear nerve, supplies the hearing and equilibrium receptors. The ninth cranial nerve, CN9, the glossopharyngeal nerve, is responsible for multiple functions. These include speech, swallowing, salivation, sensory innervation of the pharynx, and some other structures, sensory innervation to the taste buds of the posterior one-third of the tongue, and salivation. It also receives signals from the chemoreceptors in the carotid bodies, which help regulate respiration, and baroreceptors of the carotid sinus, which help monitor blood pressure. The 10th cranial nerve, CN10, the vagus nerve, is responsible for swallowing, speech, sensory innervation of the pharynx, larynx, thoracic and abdominal organs, as well as the baroreceptors of the aortic arch, chemoreceptors in the carotid and aortic bodies, and from taste buds of the epiglottis. The 11th cranial nerve, CN11, the accessory nerve, innervates the trapezius and sternocleidomastoid muscles, which together move head and neck, and the nerve carries sensory proprioceptive information from these muscles. The 12th cranial nerve, CN12, the hypoglossal nerve, sends fibers to the muscles of the tongue, providing its movement. If we take the first letter of each nerve, we can build a mnemonic to help remember the names of the cranial nerves. Only one of the two athletes felt very good, victorious, and healthy. Now let us discuss the terms special, general, somatic, and visceral. The information is considered special if it is related to our special senses: vision, smell, taste, hearing, and balance, while general is referred to information from everywhere else. The information carried by a nerve is called somatic if it goes to or from the skeletal muscles and skin, or visceral if it travels to or from our internal organs. Broadly speaking, the cranial nerve consists of 4 components: somatic motor component, visceral motor component, visceral sensory component, and somatic sensory component. Further, these components can be classified in a more comprehensive manner, but we will discuss this in greater detail in subsequent videos. Now let's take a look at the diagram. As we can see, some nerves have only a sensory component, others have only a motor component, and others have both. Thus, all cranial nerves can be divided into purely sensory, purely motor, while most nerves are mixed. If the cranial nerve has a sensory component, whether visceral or somatic, then it has a sensory nucleus. If it has a motor component, then it has a motor nucleus. Finally, if it has a visceral component, the motor part specifically, then it has an autonomic or visceral nucleus. The names of the nuclei are not crucial for now. What we should really pay attention to at this point is the distribution of the nuclei in the brainstem. The midbrain contains the nuclei of the 3rd and 4th cranial nerves, the pons contains nuclei of the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th cranial nerves, and the medulla oblongata contains the nuclei of the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th cranial nerves. This is the rule of force, if we conditionally consider the 1st and 2nd cranial nerves also to be part of the midbrain. There are several exceptions to this rule, which we will discuss in greater detail in subsequent videos. Alright, here's a quick summary. The peripheral nervous system is the part of the nervous system located outside the brain and spinal cord. Among other things, it includes 31 pairs of spinal nerves and 12 pairs of cranial nerves. All cranial nerves can be divided into purely sensory, purely motor, while most nerves are mixed. Cranial nerve nuclei are distributed within the brainstem, the midbrain, pons, and the medulla oblongata.